The dog hit the pavement on his side. 3 ribs cracked. You could hear it. The small golden body skidded 6 feet across the wet asphalt before it stopped moving, and for one terrible second, nobody breathed. Then Marcus Webb laughed. It was the kind of laugh that lived in boardrooms and courtrooms. Practiced, untouchable, the laugh of a man who had never once faced a consequence he couldn't buy his way out of. He adjusted his cufflinks. He straightened the collar of a coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Get it off the sidewalk," he said to the security guard behind him. "Before it bleeds on the concrete." The old man on the ground didn't make a sound. His name was Joseph Reyes. He was 67 years old. He had survived Fallujah. He had survived IEDs and sniper fire, and the kind of heat that cooked a man from the inside. He had not survived coming home. He was sitting with his back against the marble steps of the Webb Financial Building where he had been sitting every morning for 4 months. Harmless. Quiet, invisible, except for Biscuit, the small golden mutt who had wandered into Joseph's life outside a shelter 18 months ago and refused to leave. Biscuit was not moving. Joseph was reaching for him. His hands, scarred, weathered, trembling, were reaching across the wet pavement while the security guard raised a boot again. And 30 feet away, leaning against a rental car in the parking structure across the street, a man named Daniel Sharp stopped chewing his coffee straw. His name meant nothing to most people. That was intentional. Daniel Sharp had spent 11 years as a scout sniper with the 1st Marine Division. He had come home 4 years ago with a Purple Heart, a titanium plate in his left shoulder, and a consulting contract doing private security assessments for financial institutions. He was in the city for 48 hours, 1 meeting, 1 contract. Clean, quiet, professional. That was the plan. He watched the security guard's boot hover over the dog. He watched the old man flinch, pulling Biscuit closer, whimpering in a language that wasn't quite words. He watched Marcus Webb check his phone. Daniel Sharp had learned in 11 years of service to read distance the way other men read text. He had learned to read bodies, to read intent, to read the exact geometry of what was about to happen before it happened. He had learned that there were moments, thin, critical moments, when doing nothing was a decision just as loud as doing something. He pushed off the car. The morning had started simply enough. Daniel had arrived at the city the night before, checked into a mid-range hotel 4 blocks from Webb Financial, and laid his clothes out the way he always did. Methodical, precise, muscle memory from a decade of pre-mission prep. His daughter, Maya, had called at 9 p.m. to remind him to eat something that wasn't from a vending machine. She was 13 and already more organized than he had ever been. "Dad," she had said, "you have a problem with feeding yourself. I ate a granola bar. That's not food. That's compressed sadness." He had laughed. Actually laughed. The real kind, not the polite kind. He carried that laugh into the morning with him like a canteen. Something to drink from when the rest of the day felt dry. The consulting meeting was at 9 a.m. He left early, the way he always did. Early meant options. Early meant you saw the terrain before the terrain saw you. That was when he heard it, not a scream. Nothing so dramatic. Just a small, sharp yelp, the sound an animal makes when something breaks, and then silence, which was somehow worse. He crossed the street at a walk, not a jog, not a run. Running looked like panic. Running in a city toward a scene like this, near a security guard who was already jumpy, near a man who clearly had money and power, and the assumption that both of those things were permanent. Running was the wrong move. He walked like he owned the pavement, like he had somewhere specific to be, and it happened to be here. The security guard was broad-shouldered, maybe 230 pounds, with the look of a man who had been hired for size rather than judgment. He was still standing over Joseph Reyes when Daniel reached the curb. Biscuit had dragged himself 3 inches toward the old man. His back leg wasn't tracking right. "Hey!" Daniel's voice came out quiet and flat, the kind of flat that didn't need volume. "Step back from him." The guard turned. Marcus Webb looked up from his phone. "And who?" Webb said with genuine curiosity, as if Daniel were a mildly interesting insect. "Are you?" "Nobody important." Daniel crouched beside Biscuit. The dog's eyes were open, blinking. His breathing was shallow, but it was there. Still there. "You're on private property," the guard said. "No." Daniel didn't look up. He ran 2 fingers along Biscuit's spine, slow and careful, feeling for what was wrong. The sidewalk is public. The steps are private. He's on the sidewalk. He glanced at Joseph. You okay? Joseph Reyes looked at him with the eyes of a man who had stopped expecting people to ask that question. Pale brown eyes, tired, ancient, a Marine Corps tattoo barely visible beneath the fraying cuff of his jacket. Semper Fi, Daniel said quietly. Something moved in Joseph's face. Old recognition. The way soldiers knew each other across decades and distance. Corps, Joseph managed. You? Marines, Scout Sniper, 1st Division. Daniel stood. He looked at Marcus Webb. Your guy kicked a dog belonging to a combat veteran sitting on a public sidewalk. I'm gonna need you to call a vet. Webb stared at him. I'm gonna need you to leave my property. He's not on your property. Daniel's voice didn't change. Same flat, same quiet. And neither is his dog. So here's what happens next. Either you call a vet, or I call the city desk at 3 different news networks and I tell them that Marcus Webb, whose company is currently in the middle of an SEC review, based on public filings I read last night, had a security guard assault a homeless veteran's dog on a public street on a Tuesday morning. I'll have video. You don't have video. Daniel held up his phone. The recording light was red. He had started it when he pushed off the car. 11 years as a sniper taught a man to be patient, to prepare, to make decisions before the situation demanded them, so that when the situation arrived, he was already 3 moves ahead. Webb stared at the phone. His jaw was tight. His cufflinks caught the light. Get him a cab to the nearest veterinary clinic, he said to the guard, in a voice like the words cost him something significant. Then he walked up the steps and into the building without looking back. The guard didn't say anything. He didn't help either. Daniel called the cab himself. He paid for it too. The veterinary clinic was 12 blocks north, a small practice on a side street, the kind that had a handwritten sign in the window, offering a sliding payment scale for low-income clients. Dr. Millionaire had been open for 40 minutes when the cab arrived. She was a compact woman in her late 30s with quick hands and tired eyes, and the practiced calm of someone who had seen a lot of broken things come through her door. She looked at Joseph. She looked at Daniel, who was standing in the doorway like a load-bearing wall. What happened? He was kicked, Daniel said. Hard, hard. Doctor. Nair didn't say anything else. She took Biscuit to the back. Joseph sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room and didn't speak. He held his hands together in his lap, those scarred, weathered hands, and stared at the floor between his feet. Daniel sat beside him. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't fill the silence with noise. He had learned in the long quiet after his own worst days that sometimes the kindest thing another person could do was simply refuse to leave. They sat. After 11 minutes, Joseph said, "He was the one good thing." Daniel didn't respond right away. "I know," he said finally. "They took everything else, the job, the apartment. My son stopped calling." Joseph's voice was flat in the way voices got when they had used up all their emotion and had nothing left but fact. But Biskeith just showed up one night, outside the shelter, just sat down next to me like he'd been looking for me. The ghost of something, not quite a smile, moved across Joseph's face. Never left. Daniel looked at the floor. He thought about Maya, about what it meant to have someone who simply refused to leave. "He's still breathing," Daniel said. "That matters." Dr. Nair came out 40 minutes later, 2 ribs, a hairline fracture in the rear left leg, bruising but no internal bleeding. Biscuit was sedated and resting. He would need 4 to 6 weeks of careful recovery, limited movement, and medication he couldn't afford. Joseph already knew that last part without being told. Daniel watched the math cross the old man's face, the grim, immediate arithmetic of a man with no safety net calculating something he couldn't solve. "What's the bill?" Daniel asked. Dr. Nair hesitated. "With the x-rays and the initial treatment and the medication, we try to work with people on payment plans." "What's the bill?" she told him. Daniel paid it without discussion. Joseph looked at him, the way people looked at things they didn't quite believe were real. "I don't take charity," he said quietly, but clearly. "It's not charity." Daniel pocketed his wallet. "It's a debt you served. People like me came home to something. You didn't. That gap, that's not your failure. That's a debt this country owes you that it hasn't paid. I'm just paying a fraction of it." He paused. "You don't have to thank me. You don't have to like me. But you should let me help because the alternative is Your dog doesn't get his medication, and you spend the rest of the week arguing with yourself about your pride. Joseph looked at him for a long time. Marines argue different, he said finally. Yes, sir, Daniel agreed. We do. They were back outside, Joseph with a paper bag of biscuits, medications, and a follow-up appointment card, when Daniel's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Sharp. The voice on the other end was male, smooth, measured. The same voice he had heard 40 minutes ago, adjusting its tone for a security guard. This is Marcus Webb. Daniel stopped walking. I'd like to offer you the consulting contract, Webb said, directly. Better terms than the standard offer. Significantly better. The world had gone very quiet. And in exchange, Daniel said. A pause. In exchange, the recording you made this morning stays private. Daniel looked at Joseph Reyes, who was standing beside him, reading the medication instructions with the focused intensity of a man who had decided that getting this right was the most important thing in the world. He looked at the Webb Financial Tower 4 blocks south, its glass face reflecting a sky that was beginning to cloud over. He thought about what Maya would say. She would say, "You have a problem with letting things go." She would not be wrong. Mr. Webb, Daniel said, "I'm going to decline the contract." Silence. The recording, Daniel continued, is already uploaded to a secure server. Not published, not sent anywhere. But if anything happens to Mr. Reyes, his spot, his safety, his dog, anything, it publishes automatically. He let that sit for a moment. You should also know that the security guard's boot is visible in the footage. And so is your face while you laughed. The SEC might find that context interesting, given everything else they're currently finding interesting about your organization. Another silence. Longer. You're making a mistake, Webb said. I've made bigger ones, Daniel said. Goodbye, Mr. Webb. He hung up. He sent the recording to 2 journalists he trusted before he reached the end of the block. Not to publish, not yet. Just to hold. Witnesses he could call on if things shifted. 11 years of operating in hostile terrain had taught him one thing above everything else. You didn't wait for threats to materialize. You made the threat landscape unworkable before the first shot was fired. He set up a perimeter, digitally, legally, quietly, the way he had always done it. Then, he walked back to Joseph and asked him if he had somewhere safe to sleep that night. The answer was no. It took Daniel 4 phone calls. A veterans services coordinator he knew from a nonprofit back home. A former staff sergeant now running a transitional housing program in the city. And 2 personal favors he had been saving for something important enough to spend them. To get Joseph Reyes a room for the following 3 weeks in a clean facility with meal service and a no pet policy that the director agreed to quietly waive for one small, injured golden dog in recovery. You do this a lot? Joseph asked, watching Daniel work the phone with the precision of a man running a tactical operation. No, Daniel said honestly. I'm usually on a plane home by now. He had missed his consulting meeting entirely. He didn't especially regret it. Maya called at 6 p.m. Dad, it's been all day. Did you eat? I had lunch. He had in fact eaten a sandwich at the veterinary clinic's front desk while waiting for Biscuit's second x-ray. This felt like a moral victory. A real lunch? A sandwich. That's borderline. A pause. How'd the meeting go? He leaned against the railing outside the transitional housing facility. Down the street, a light blinked on in a second-floor window. Somewhere inside, a man who had survived Fallujah was sitting in a clean room for the first time in months, with his dog's medications lined up on the windowsill. Meeting got canceled, Daniel said. Dad, something came up. Something always comes up with you, he smiled. The real kind. Dad? Her voice shifted, younger, softer, the tone she used when she was asking something she actually wanted the answer to. Was it the right thing? He thought about a boot. He thought about a laugh. He thought about a man's hands reaching across wet pavement for the one good thing he had left. Yeah, Bug, he said. It was the right thing. Marcus Webb's SEC complications became significantly more complicated 3 weeks later when a journalist, who had been sitting on certain information at Daniel's quiet request, published a detailed investigative piece. The security footage from the building across the street, combined with Daniel's recording, combined with 3 other complaints from city residents that had been filed and ignored over the previous 2 years, created a pattern that Webb's lawyers could not easily dissolve. The security guard was let go. Webb Financial was fined. The story ran nationally. Biscuit healed. Slowly, then all at once the way healing usually went. A week of stillness, then a cautious step, then one morning, he simply stood up and looked at Joseph with his whole body wagging. And the fracture was just something that had happened, not something that defined him. Joseph Reyes moved into permanent transitional housing 6 weeks after that. He got a part-time job helping the facility's maintenance team. He was good at it, methodical, careful. He sent Daniel a text message on a Tuesday morning, short, 3 lines, the kind of message a man wrote when he hadn't written many messages in a long time and wasn't sure of the grammar. Dog is walking. I am working. You were right about the debt. Thank you, soldier. Semper Fi. Daniel read it twice, standing in his kitchen while Maya made too much noise with the cereal cabinet. He wrote back, Semper Fi, brother. Glad you're both standing. He set the phone down. He poured 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for the daughter who was 13 and already wiser than him in most respects. And he stood in his kitchen on an ordinary morning and understood, in the wordless way you understood things that mattered, that some contracts were worth breaking and some detours were the whole point. He had gone to that city for a paycheck. He had come home with something that didn't have a price,